I always blame myself rather than fate. Bigger is not necessarily better.
Pierluigi built his own path, going from hundreds of rejected CVs to advising global organizations across what he called a forest.
My stadium is a strategic advisory that provides services revolving around sustainability, governance, climate resilience, social impact management for sport organizations. So I think the biggest lie is I can do everything. So I decided to be an independent advisor. I take that freedom to tell them nothing but the bloody truth.
Most founders choose to build a business. Pierluigi didn't. After the 2008 crisis, no one would hire him. So he built his own path, going from hundreds of rejected CVs, I think it was 400, to advising global organizations across sport, events, and sustainability. But here's a slight twist. He chose not to scale. Instead, he built what he called a forest, or a network, and not a company. Today, we unpack why crisis creates better entrepreneurs and why truth beats growth all the time. Pierluigi, it's great to have you on the call today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. What an intro, I would say.
Let's start off right at the beginning. You didn't choose entrepreneurship. What forced your hand in 2008?
Because of the financial crisis, in reality. My background is in industrial engineering. So I moved to London primarily looking for opportunities in the field of stadium and event management. And what I was interested really is in bringing my experience to the sports and events industry in terms of everything that was revolving at the time around primarily quality and environmental management systems, because that was really the backbone of what I had studied and what my thesis was about. And then I did this postgraduate diploma in stadium and event management. So I was trying to really transfer to the sport and events industry those concepts. Then when the 2008 crisis started to hit quite hard, I had to literally reinvent myself. I was at a conference and I bumped into someone that was introducing this new standard that was about revolving around sustainable event management. It was a British standard at the time. And I had a sort of light bulb moment where you really think, oh, okay, so now this is interesting. It's what I do, but that is done in a different way. It applies the same criteria, the same concept, but in another area. Still strategic planning and really what my core skill set was about, but position is in a slightly different way. So I was then blessed enough to be asked to transform this British standard into an ISO standard, so into an international standard. This was part of the legacy of London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games, and 300 experts around the world gathered around the virtual table for 2.5 years and created this new standard of reference. From the industry for the industry was the motto. And this was really the big shift of paradigm for also my career, because that's where then I decided to turn this into a set of services, training, support, consultancy, advisory for sport organizations who were really starting to consider sustainability as a strategic competitive advantage and not just a nice to have aspect in their own way of working. So that was really the very first shift of paradigm that really determined my career and makes me who I am nowadays.
And, I want to go back to that point, right? I think you said 400 CVs. What broke mentally for you before it started working?
I always blame myself rather than fate.
You blame yourself. Okay. Tell me more.
So I would rather say probably they were not convincing enough. They were not compelling enough. There's a very important aspect. Thank you for flagging this, because it gives me the opportunity also to explain how difficult, especially at the time, it was for someone coming from Italy, coming from Europe in general, because we used to have this EU model for writing our CVs, where the emphasis on what was relevant was completely different. So when I was introducing myself, or if I still introduce myself in Italy, I'll say I'm an engineer. That makes a statement. Whereas in the UK, when I was introducing to people like that, they would say, I can tell you are a very well-educated person, but what have you achieved in the meantime? What have you done, practically speaking? And in fact, should you want to make a first good impression here, I have to say, I'm a managing director of Unlimited. So that shows you also culturally the mentality, how different it is. So you have to, first of all, adapt to the change of circumstances and the new environment in which you are. And we will come back to that when we talk about organizations. Probably, I'm sure you will ask me more about it, because it's pretty much ingrained into the whole concept of sustainability. So it was very interesting for me, going back to the CVs, to having to completely rethink also the perception of myself that I have to portray. Because as I said, in Italy, I would have counted on some things which were already a statement by default. But here they didn't make any added value to the counterpart that was listening to me. So that was a very, very interesting journey and a very tough, but I think also very formative learning.
Understood. And very well said. You talked about your company. So why did you deliberately choose not to scale your company?
That's an interesting question. Let me answer with something that happened just last week, and then I'll apply to my own company. First of all, I was entering a niche market. So that's the very first thing that I would like to make a point about. And when you enter a niche market, I think what's very important to understand is that bigger is not necessarily better. And then I can apply this also to capital-intensive businesses like sporting venues, stadiums, like airline companies. Very high capital-intensive kind of businesses. And before deciding to upgrade, I think you need to make sure that you have maximized your current capacity. So I was having this conversation with a very important venue in the UK, and they were explaining me how they have these plans to build new buildings and in order to accommodate more guests, etc. And I said, hold on a second, but you already have quite a big infrastructure here, which is empty for 3 months per year. So wouldn't you rather explore the opportunity of differentiating the services you can offer, maybe even to a different audience, but by maximizing the current infrastructure before getting involved into mega investments, which will only add costs, complexity, people that need to be managed? I would rather explore that. So it's not that I'm not a great fan of upscaling and upgrading. I think maximizing your capacity and making sure that you are driving already at full speed for what your company can tolerate, of course, I think it would be the very first step. And then if you can think bigger, why not?
Got it. And so that's a good piece of advice out there. And, you called your model a forest. What does that mean?
So when I had to embark myself into a bigger project, some of which are quite big, I was really wondering whether I should have not hired people that would have worked with me. And then I realized that I was coming also, again, culturally speaking, from a place whereby I don't think I would have been a great businessman with employees because I would have prioritized my people before my business. I would have taken care of them, even at the detriment of my own company. And that is a little bit cultural because it comes from what we called at the time in Italy, end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, the social capitalism. We have some examples. Olivetti is one of those, the guy that was really battling against IBM at the time. And he was basically providing houses for his employees, education for their children, protection in terms of insurances. So it was really a model that I was born and raised in and that I think has framed me in a certain way. Although today, it's not probably applicable as it used to be. It was a different era. I'm well aware of that. Still, that is ingrained in my way of thinking. So I had to readjust and readapt. You see how many times it comes, the readjustment and the adaptation to circumstances that change dramatically. And the forest is a concept whereby for bigger projects, we bring together some of the best experts that I know in my field. And together we divide and conquer. So we align on the overall vision and how we will support our client in achieving its intended outcomes, but we ultra specialize our work. So rather than having one consultant, you have 4, 5, 6 of them on one of the biggest projects I've been working on. It was a huge group of people, but everyone was taking care of one of the pillars. And when you manage to bring down egos and really build a collaborative approach, that's where you start really thriving. And so the concept of the forest is a set of trees, no hierarchy at all. They are all interconnected through the roots, so you cannot even see that interconnection, but it does exist. So if there's a fire on this side of the forest, the first tree will communicate through the roots, the second to the third to the fourth, so they can all prevent and react immediately. So that I love that concept. I read it in an article, and I try to make it mine, to turn it into something that is applicable to my own way of working.
And based on all your experience, what's the biggest lie CEOs tell themselves?
By the time you start to become successful, and you start delivering great quality work. The risk that I foresee in that respect is that you get rid of the imposter syndrome, which is always there, but it starts to turn into some sort of level of entitlement, whereby you think you know more than what you know. And you start telling yourself that you can do it. Because if Simac is doing it, I can do it. It is, and we go back to my previous answer, that in nowadays world, I think hyper-specialization has become really the factor that differentiates you from the others and makes you successful. So I think the biggest lie is I can do everything.
Well said. Yeah, that's quite powerful, right? And that's, I think, the biggest downfall also for some CEOs out there.
Exactly. And that's why I always take care of that when I have these conversations, especially with colleagues or with clients who are, ramping up very fast. You can see that we tend to lose a little bit that sense of being always down to earth. And so you need a shake sometimes, because the Greek mythology is not there for just entertaining people. So the myth of Icarus exists for a reason.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the things you had mentioned is you said your job is not to be liked. Why?
I think it comes with the choice I made. So I decided to be an independent advisor. And that comes with a price, of course, because you will never have a big logo close to your name. However, that gives you something that I think there's no money that can pay you back, which is freedom of speech. Not that there's no freedom of speech, but you have more freedom of speech for one simple reason. Let's pretend you are my CEO. What I'm going to tell you won't be detrimental for my promotion, for my salary increase, for getting a bonus, for being sent to a specific event or whatever. And so I feel that I have, or I take that freedom to tell them nothing but the bloody truth, too bluntly probably sometimes. But the scope is really to serve their cause, not to just go against the current. I would love them to always take the most informed decision. Then it can even go against what I recommended. But at least it's a really well-informed decision. And in order for them to take that decision, you need to show them the dark side of the moon, whether they like it or not.
Very interesting. How do you balance truth with keeping the relationships then in that case?
It's built on credibility. In my work, people do evaluate and appreciate the consultant before the consultancy, the advisor before the advisor that is behind me. And this is done not only through, of course, competence, trying to really know everything and more than everything. I can tell you this small anecdote. I was talking to a CEO of a small football club in the north of the UK. And after the session, he told me, you told me things about my company that I didn't know. I said, well, that's the job. The job is to try to dig. I love to say that I don't like to leave any stone unturned. And that's how you build your credibility. But again, it's merged with a good level also of empathy. I'm always there for you. There is this, my favorite answer that CEOs love when they are getting a bit anxious or when there is something that went wrong. At that precise moment, all they want to hear is something that reassures them. They are going to find the solution themselves. They don't need the advisor. But in that specific moment, all they want to hear is, leave it with me. And that is already something that brings down the temperature and makes them think. Again, I need lucidity, because if they make the wrong decision, these might have an impact on people, clients, on the market, on the revenue streams, on you name it. So bringing down that temperature, and it's not easy, as you can imagine, because sometimes leaving with me doesn't mean that I got the solution.
Yeah.
Great leaders take people not where they want to be. Great leaders take people where they are.
Very good. Talk to me about that. When it comes to great leaders or founders, what blind spot do most founders never see in themselves?
I'm going to use words that come from a colleague of mine. She said that the biggest issue that she found along her career, and that she managed to turn that into an opportunity, was playing with egos. What's in there for me is always the first question. It's not explicit, but believe me, it's always implicit. We always, polish that, and we talk about needs and expectations. This falls definitely into the expectations. It's not said, but it's there. So once you are trying to embark them in a new journey or strive for achieving some excellent results, which might require, again, investments, more people, allocation of resources in a different way, contradict their own narrative, etc. Well, that's where you need to also try always to find a quick win for them to shine in the short term, That is the leverage for them getting the long term, which is what you want them to achieve in the mid-long run. But if you don't have a token to be offered immediately and play with that ego, but I mean it in a constructive way, just to be clear, you really need to find a win-win. Let's rephrase it like that. It's more a win-win, but it is a win-win that has to provide a result in short term, because sustainability is always perceived like something long term. Yeah, but I'm never going to see results like solar panels before 10 years. So I have to provide a quick win in the next 12 to 18 months maximum for then having my solar panels installed, which will going to give that return on investment in the 7 years that they don't like to hear about. I was just the example, and we don't do that. We don't do solar panels.
But what is that question that you want to ask the founder, CEO, that instantly exposes maybe a weak strategy?
I always start asking them. Basically, what I like to do is really to be perceived, as I told you, to build that level of credibility coming from the competence, etc. But especially now that my stadium is in a more mature phase, you don't have to make any statement. You don't have to prove anything. So you are in this privileged position whereby they know you already. If they hired you, if they contracted you, they know you already. So you can really go there and as a peer, ask them what you really want. What are you really trying to achieve? What's behind what you're telling me? Because they always have a statement, right? They're going to try to conquer your agreement with. What I really would like to understand from them is, yes, but beside this, what are you really looking for? And also, what are you struggling with that, if possible, I might help you with? So that's really the kind of conversation where I set the tone. And then when they ask me some difficult questions, I always answer them. Would you like a professional answer, or would you like the tough, real answer? All of them will tell me the tough, real answer. The truth is that some of them would prefer just the professional one.
Really? Interesting. In that, what would a founder say or do that shows that they need help?
Well, usually, I can talk about my own field of expertise. As I told you, it's such a niche thing that when they call you, it's really because primarily there's lack of awareness or lack of education on literally how things should be done. And that's where, thank you, because it gives me the opportunity to answer better to the previous questions. I always ask them, why should we do it? Because they call me because they want to know how to do it. And I say, we need to, first of all, understand each other on the why we should be doing this. Why would you like to back your company into this journey? And then we have to talk about what needs to be done. And only then we can start delving into the how we're going to do it. So it's really, as you can imagine, not the simplest conversation, but you can see that you give them plenty of food for thought. My meetings with them usually are booked for 15, 20 minutes. They last at least an hour. And you know how busy these people are usually, right? With the PA knocking at the door, reminding them, they go, yeah. And that's where you know that you are succeeding and you prepared properly, right? You are coming to tell me that I'm prioritizing profits over people, over planet, so it's going to make me look bad. It took me a while to answer, but that's, I think, the kind of perception that it generates.
For the audience listening in, can you tell them what you actually do at a company level?
So my stadium is strategic advisory that provides services revolving around sustainability, governance, climate resilience, social impact management for sport organizations that want to integrate sustainability strategy into their own business strategy. So when we come in, we help you in really aligning your sustainability narrative and your actions with the overall business strategy so that we minimize that discrepancy between what your vision, mission, and values are and what sustainability will imply that you will have to do in order to, as I said earlier, walk your walk and talk your talk.
Can you also talk about some of your, I would say, clients or customers you've worked for till date?
Yes. One of my longest clients in terms of time and dedication is Formula E, which is, according to GSPS, the Global Sustainability Benchmark in Sport, the most sustainable sport in the world, and it's been ranked number one for the last 4 years in a row. So I am proud to be part of this team of brilliant people that have enabled us to achieve these great results. Again, going back to leadership where you ought to be rather than where you want to be, this would have never been happened without the full support from their founder and all the top management that this company has, who has always integrated, fully ingrained sustainability in its own ethos. The core of Formula E has always been innovation, technology, and sustainability altogether for delivering global sports, global motorsport around the world. Then I also work with EMEA in the EMEA region. So I'm trying to support them in developing a ad hoc sustainability strategy for the EMEA games. So NBA games that take place in the Europe and Middle East region, and try to develop best practice that then could be transferred to the main house in the US. In the past, I've also worked with the Paris Olympic and Paralympic Games. Another couple of clients that I'm really proud of working with is EMEA, which is the very first hydrogen powered off-road championship series, FIA branded, which saw the dawn last October. It was the first race in Saudi Arabia, as well as E1 electric motorboats. So trying to make boats fly on foils, a little bit like in sailing, EV boats that achieve up to 80 kilometers per hour, state-of-the-art, technologically advanced boats. But again, with the ethos of this championship for EMEA to flag and racing locations which are at risk of climate change. And for what concerns E1, at the backbone of the championship ethos, there's coastal restoration, electrification of ports and building infrastructure for electrifying the marine industry, as well as taking care of coastal area.
Very well said. Thank you. If you stripped everything away from what you just mentioned, right? What do your clients actually pay for? You stripped everything back. What do your clients actually pay for?
That's a very interesting question. Certainly not my pretty face. Not even the Italian humor, I would say. I think is that credibility that, of course, not me, but the ISO systems that I help them developing and implementing guarantee, because they've seen the results of having, as I always love to say, the house in order. Because then when you go through due diligences from investors, from sponsors, from teams, from manufacturers, and they see that the house is in order, that reinforces your credibility, builds strong and trustworthy, long-lasting relationships, enables you to negotiate some new contracts, hopefully with better conditions, because the investor or the sponsor, the team, the manufacturer feel very much reassured that they are associating their brand with someone that really is walking the walk and talking the talk, as I said earlier.
Very well said. I think credibility stood out over there.
Credibility, yes.
It was great having you on the show. That's a wrap. Thank you very much.